Hi, welcome back to the Weekly Why. This week we have Parsha Bo. This week there are a couple different great topics that can be discussed. We have here the finishing up the 10 plagues of Egypt. One issue in particular I want to discuss, though, is that here we have the very first commandment given to the Jewish people as a nation. So this isn't the first commandment in the whole Torah, but this is the first commandment given to the Jewish people as a nation, and that is the commandment of the new moon, sanctification of the new moon. And that's in Exodus chapter 12, verse 2. So it's Rosh Chodesh, which actually just happened today. So one issue in particular I'd like to talk about, or one little idea, is that in terms of why this mitzvah, out of all others, was the one which was chosen to be the first one given to the Jewish people. There must be some inherent significance. I mean, this is the very first one. And so as Rashi, the commentator, points out, Rosh Chodesh isn't something that just happens when people are, when people are spectators. So what that means is, for example, Shabbat. Shabbat is every basically Friday night to Saturday night, no matter what we're doing. If I could be in shul, I could be driving a car, I could be watching television, no matter what I'm doing, whether it's in line with the laws of Shabbat or it's not, no matter what happens, the reality is that Shabbat comes and Shabbat goes, right? Rosh Chodesh, however, the new month is different. What happens is that basically two witnesses, at least when there was a temple, two witnesses would report they saw the new moon, and they would report that to the Sanhedrin, the Jewish courts. And only then did the new moon become official. And so what that meant was that in the absence of that happening, if that didn't happen, technically there was no new moon. So what that means essentially is that the Jewish people were in control of their own destiny. And so I think that the reason that this is here present along really just prior to the Exodus is that what we're seeing is that if you imagine you were a Jew in Egypt at this time, you're seeing all these incredible miracles happening, you're seeing all these things happening, and that God taking the Jews out of Egypt. It can be very easy to think to yourself, oh, you know what? God is going to do everything for me, God is going to be doing all these things, and really this is just a spectator sport. And so I think that the lesson from Rosh Chodesh is that basically is to teach us, yes, it's very much true that God controls the universe and ultimately our destinies and is there for us no matter what, but ultimately we are masters of our own destinies. So what that means is that you and I and all of us are able to get up in the morning and are able to determine which free will choices we're going to take, where we're going to head with our lives, what we're going to do, the impact we're going to have on others, and what we're going to do in terms of our own self-development and potential. And so I think that's a really, really powerful lesson, because if the Jews in Egypt, the people who, more than anybody else, could have been forgiven to think, well, you know what, God is just going to take care of you, don't worry about it. But if them, even them, especially them, were told, you know what, don't forget you are in charge of your own destiny, and no one can change that. That's only up to you. And I think it's a really powerful lesson for us, that no matter how much sometimes we can feel that we're not in control or things are just happening and we can't control what's happening, that ultimately we do have that complete self-determination, that all free will choices, depending on what we want to do, what we're going to do with our time, how we're going to lead our lives, and the impact we're going to have on others, that is completely and totally up to us. So that is a pretty empowering thought if you sit and reflect on it. And I think that's the idea here, that the very first commandment, the most important principle, I think, of the Jews coming together as a nation is that ultimately only we can determine the direction in which we're headed. So that's it for Parsha Bo. Best wishes, Shabbat Shalom, God bless.